Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Genius Material webinar. This week we're going to look at some more of the big mistakes that people make when they revise. That's not everyone, of course, but you'll be surprised at how many people do some of these things. Let's make sure that you know what to avoid doing, because the things I'm going to talk about are counterproductive to your remembering what you've learnt. And of course this whole program is all about focusing on what does work so that you can remember easily what you've learnt. As you've been revising the Genius Material way for a little while now, you've already begun to build a repertoire of techniques for studying. So you'll already have begun to speed things up and get more done. You'll have discovered that you can indeed spend time working hard and have it pay off when you test yourself, when you find that you can recall the information you've learnt. So let's have a look at some of the other common mistakes people make, so you can check that you're not making any of them yourself. Let's begin this week's webinar with the environment around you. Save the environment. How does an untidy, disorganised environment make you feel? Is it conducive to concentration and clarity? No, of course it isn't. If you're working your socks off, revising hard to achieve something important, isn't it a shame to undermine that effort in any way at all? Spend just a moment now thinking carefully about how you could create an environment that supports your valiant efforts. Think about where you'll study. Will it be free of noise and interruptions? To achieve that, will you need the cooperation of colleagues, or maybe family members? What do you need to put in place? Could you take the phone off the hook and avoid emails and social media for the duration? Is the environment warm enough, but not so warm that it sends you to sleep? How do you revise best? At a desk or in a comfortable chair? Set up your environment so you can slip easily into study mode. So your automatic unconscious mind knows that this is the time and the place for study. So by the time you've gone to that place, your brain is already there waiting to make a start. Another name for discovering a part of the house that urgently needs cleaning just when you'd planned to knuckle down to revising is procrastination. It comes under the heading of avoidance activities. We've all been there, haven't we? We were just going to sit down to revise, but realised the hob needs cleaning. Now, and once we've done that, we thought we might as well finish the kitchen work surfaces, and there's no point in leaving it there. Unexpectedly, the urge grabs us to wipe down the cupboard fronts, mop the floor, put a load of washing on, vacuum the hall. Sound familiar? Studying is hard work. It can be very enjoyable and fulfilling work, but it is hard work nevertheless. Your automatic, unconscious mind just wants you to feel comfortable and will thwart your good intentions to study, because anything's got to be easier than revising. Perhaps you need to give yourself some tough love. Acknowledge that while you'd like to avoid the challenge, you recognise how good you'll feel when you've made some progress. Focus on what passing the exams will do for you. And above all, regardless of how you feel, pay attention to your commitment to yourself and just do it. I expect you know how important water is to our bodies, but I wonder if you know just how important it is. The brain is made up of nearly 80% water. Your brain can't function properly when it's not sufficiently hydrated. An average person needs to drink around 2 litres of water a day. Although you do need to check what's appropriate to you. For example, if you're on medication for high blood pressure, if you've got anything special going on, then just check that. Don't take my word for it. But most people need a lot more water than they realise. Only 1 or 2% dehydration. That doesn't sound much, does it? But by the time you're 1 or 2% dehydrated, you've already been gagging for that cup of tea for ages. So that's the first sign that you need to do something about it. Only 1 or 2% dehydration causes, get this, critical shrinkage of the brain. And that impairs neuromuscular coordination, concentration, and thinking. Makes you think, doesn't it? See, it can alter the concentration of electrolytes, such as sodium, potassium, and chloride. And that also has a negative effect on your brain's functioning. Your brain can't store water, so you really must drink even when you're not thirsty. It's a good idea just to have a small bottle or a glass on your desk and just keep it topped up with water and just keep sipping throughout the day. And by the way, as we get older, we tend to lose our sense of thirst. That's interesting, isn't it? I don't think most people realise that. So count the number of glasses you drink. That way you know what you're drinking and what you're not. And you might find that it's less water than you think. A couple of million years ago, as the rainforests shrank and the food supply collapsed with it, early man began to do a lot less climbing and a lot more walking, and specifically across the African savannah, searching for food and shelter as they went. It's believed that men would have walked 10 to 20 kilometres every day, and women 5 to 10 kilometres. So these were the circumstances under which the human brain developed. On the move. And of all the animals on the planet, the human brain is the most complex and highly developed of them all. And the human brain developed as they were trogging about many, many miles every day. So movement was natural and normal. Recent research tells us there's a direct link between exercise and brain power. They did some research with, well, they've done loads of research, but one in particular I wanted to mention was some they did with school children. They got them to spend 30 minutes jogging 2 or 3 times a week. So that's exercising 2 or 3 times a week for 30 minutes each time. And just jogging, I mean, that's not too strenuous, is it? And after doing that for 3 months, they were, because they were in the habit of testing the children's cognitive power anyway, they were doing that continually before, during and after. After the 3 months of increased exercise, all the kids had improved cognitive performance. In all the tests they did, they performed better. Their brains were performing better compared to the test group who'd taken no exercise. Also, what's more, when the children stopped exercising, their cognitive performance levels went back to where they started. Need I say more? Stress. You can't think straight when you're stressed and anxious. You're not supposed to think straight when you're stressed and anxious. Physiologically, we human beings are pretty much the same as we were 10,000 years ago when we lived in caves. You can imagine just how important it was to our survival, when faced with a dangerous animal, to focus purely on the source of danger and take immediate and appropriate action. There was no time for being curious and creative and imaginative. There was no time for standing around scratching your head and asking your family, is this the one that ate Uncle Harry last week? Or is this a different one? Or it's interesting that this one's arrived at this time because it was here 10 minutes earlier yesterday. There's no time for all of that nonsense. Our brains have developed, or at least the people who have survived, their brains had developed to just focus on the source of danger and react appropriately to it, which would normally mean hitting it with a stone or running away. Definitely no time for being curious and creative and imaginative. Now, those are the resources that are useful to you now when you're revising, being curious, creative and imaginative. So in other words, if you're in the stress mode, you can't think straight, you can only focus on the source of danger. When you're not in the stress mode, then you can have the luxury of being curious, creative and imaginative. So if you've wound yourself into a lather, you're not going to be in the ideal learning state, are you? Now, if you need some help relaxing, letting go, putting things into context, you could listen to my free 10-minute guided relaxation MP3, which is sitting there in the resources section of the website. Make the most of it, use it. I've had several business people tell me that they listen to it in the middle of the day. So it's only 10 minutes. I deliberately designed it to be only 10 minutes because everybody can afford to take 10 minutes out of a busy day. Everybody can. No excuses. And many people have let me know that they listen to it in the middle of the day and it just calms them down and gets them into a resourceful place regardless of what's been going on with business in the morning. And it sets them up again to make a good productive afternoon of it. So it's there if you want it. Junk food, junk mind. If you were to ask me what I think of organic food, you might get the full 10-minute tirade. I'm absolutely beside myself that it's necessary for us to differentiate between one lot of food and another lot purporting to be unadulterated. What are they doing to the ordinary stuff that it's necessary to have organic food as an alternative? Like I say, don't get me on that subject unless you've got time to spare. Meanwhile, there are some foods sold in supermarkets which not only have no nutritional value, they actually do you harm. And in particular to your brain's functioning. So clear your mind by clearing your cupboards. And clear your cupboards of there we are, there's a list for starters. Crisps, salted peanuts, salted crackers, sweets, biscuits, processed flour, white bread, sweetened fruit juice. It's anything with sugar in it, and it's anything that's been processed, and it's anything that's got all the vast array of chemicals to help preserve the food and give them a longer shelf life. And it's, when you stop and think about it, it's really obvious which foods are likely to be difficult for the body to process and detrimental to the brain's functioning. It's not pure food, is it? It's stuff that we've messed about with. Okay. Now, I've got a question just come in from somebody. I suggest, Saresh, that you send me an email and I'll do my very best to help you with that. Okay? So it's referring, guys, to stress and how to deal with what's coming in, the information that's coming in. And I know a lot of you are very, very, very busy, not just with work and families, but with the extra time you're having to find to pass these wretched exams. So stress is known to be, we're going back to the stress section now, stress is known to be not so much what's going on around you, but your perception of the importance of its value. In other words, your reaction to it. And you can learn to react and to behave in a different way. So we can talk about that another time. Okay, so for the moment then, junk food, junk mind. You can eat what the heck you like, but I'm telling you, if you eat a lot of this stuff or any of this stuff, then you are making it more difficult for your brain to think straight. And I would like to think that you were doing everything you could to give yourselves the best chance of floating comfortably through your exams. Wouldn't that be nice, eh? Okay, now I received a phone call recently from an A-level student panicking that she only had 2 weeks before her first exam. She felt ill-prepared and anxious about the time she'd wasted. Now, she spent a good 10 minutes explaining to me why she was in a pickle, what she'd done, what she hadn't done, what there wasn't time for, how much she needed to pass these exams, the dire consequences of failing them, and on and on. I found I simply couldn't interrupt her. She had to get the whole complaint out there. But of course, to my mind, that was another 10 minutes of revision time she'd lost. By focusing on all the problems, instead of accepting where she is right now and designing a constructive plan to move forward. So my question to you is, how much time have you wasted expressing your resentment at having to take exams at all, at having to prove yourself all over again? How much time have you wasted focusing on what's not possible rather than on what you can do? I was really pleased to hear a few days later that this teenager had taken on board what I'd said and had made the most of the time she had. She stopped wasting it on worries and regrets. And as a consequence, she was able to get more done and feel better about herself and feel better about going into that first exam of hers. Of course it's possible to change your attitude and outcome. Of course it is. And of course it is even when you don't feel like it. Our feelings very often get in the way of our commitments. And sometimes they send us in a different direction. So even if you're feeling like the whole thing is a bit tricky, you're feeling like it's not going to be possible, control your mind, get on top of it. You be the one in charge. Get in control of your emotions and your beliefs, and you'll not waste any more time. The thing is, whatever's happened in the past has happened. There's not a thing you can do about it, but you are here now. What can you do with where you are here now and the time you've got left? So that's all I had to say on that score. It is a bit of a skill, directing your mind, and it does take a bit of practice, but I promise you that you'll get on much, much better if you do. Not being a victim of your feelings, but being in control and acting from your commitments rather than from how you're feeling. All right, end of lecture. Reading and rereading. Oh, you've heard me talk about this before. I'm horrified to hear that some trainers and teachers suggest that when you revise, you should go and read and reread your course manual. Anyone who's tried this and has found that they come to, just woken up, realising that they haven't taken a single word in of the last paragraph, will know what I'm talking about. And you'll know that you've gone back to the last paragraph and you've read it again. And then you've read it again. And then you've read it again. Only to find the same thing keeps happening over and over. So you know already that reading and rereading your course manual sends your brain to sleep. Now, here's something else that many people do. 100 years ago, when I was revising for my A-levels, I remember tackling my biology revision for the first time. And maybe like you, I was never taught how to revise. but just muddled through somehow year after year of exams. Anyway, I distinctly remember having the idea at this point that making notes was the thing to do. So I knew that writing notes wasn't copying everything out, or whatever it was that I used to do in the past. So I sat down with the intention of making notes, and so I picked a few words out, a few phrases out, and started writing them down. And I set about doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. But before I got to the bottom of my first piece of A4 paper, I'd begun copying out every word of my textbook for fear of missing something important. Now, if that sounds like you, then think on. All these years later, I'm aware that some therapies capitalize on the knowledge that the more we write down, the more we tend to forget. That's brilliant if someone's trying to move on from a traumatic experience of the past. But not so good if you're trying to retain the information for an exam. It doesn't work. Don't do it. And of course, I was writing on lined paper, which is why I ended up writing proper sentences, because that's what we do. We have lined paper to write proper sentences on. That's probably part of the bad habit. Lined paper encourages you to write in a linear fashion from left to right, starting at the beginning of the line and not moving on to the next line until you've filled the one before. It doesn't encourage you to use bullet points, symbols, shape, colour, numbers, pictures, charts. That's it. All the things you need to use to make your revision easy to recall. And of course, not using Genius material. I had to get that one in, didn't I? It's really simple. And most people don't realise it's this simple. And it's this. People who pass exams have a revision strategy that works for them. That's it. That's all there is to it. And different people will want to go about their revision in different ways. But as human beings, we have a lot in common. So there are some things that we all could do with knowing to make our lives a lot easier. But that's all there is to it. If you have a revision strategy that works for you, you're going to find the exams easy enough. So, if you know someone who needs to pass their exams and they're currently struggling to do so, then tell them it's simply an indication that their revision strategy isn't working for them. It's not because they're deficient in some way, there's something wrong with them. It's their strategy that doesn't work. Tell them what you know now, that if you change your revision strategy, your results will obviously change too. Even better, if they use a tried and trusted, a proven strategy for revision, so that they'll know that just like everybody else who've done so with Genius material in the past, they'll know that they will pass their exams too. And if they find that as they're making their revision, and this applies to you as well, of course, as you're learning and adopting the Genius material way of doing things, if you find that when you come to test yourself on the information you're supposed to have learnt that you don't remember everything, then it means that you're not doing something to the best of your ability. So there's something else, there's something that you're still not quite getting. I mentioned that A-level student who rang up in a panic. She's kept in touch with me, or rather I've encouraged her to keep in touch with me. And she rings me every few days and tells me how it's going. And just yesterday I had a conversation with her along the lines of, look, if you're finding you're not remembering what you think you've learnt, it's because you've simply not paid enough attention to one or more of the 3 keys to learning. And you know what those are now, don't you? 1, you've got to spend enough time with the information for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory. 2, you need to make brain-friendly notes. Human beings have a lot in common. There's a lot that we all need to know about on that score. And then there are some things that are going to be particularly important to you because of the way that you prefer to process, store and retrieve information. And the third key is that you've got to keep going back and check that you still know it, that you're keeping it current in your mind. Otherwise, your automatic unconscious mind is going to start to let it go in favour of more recent information, because from an evolutionary point of view, more recent information is likely to be more important to your survival. So, as I said to her, you're spending some time with the information, you're making some notes, you're going back to the information in some fashion. Are you paying lip service to the 3 keys to learning, or are you actually doing them justice? And the short answer was, of course, if she's not remembering everything that she intends to remember, she's not doing enough in at least one of those areas. So when you learn a new way of doing things like this, then obviously you've got to learn to what degree you need to do it for yourself. So that's some good feedback for you too. Okay. So if you know someone who knows their revision strategy has room for improvement, and you hear them talking about them being tired of wasting their time doing things that don't work, and you just want them to cut the chase and get the job done efficiently, then tell them about the many Genius Material options I've developed to answer the question, but how? If they want to brush up on their technique and merely dip a toe in the water, then they might be interested in my book, How to Pass Exams Easily by Doing Less Work, Genius Material for Financial Services Exams. You can get it from lulu.com. Just go to their website and search for my name. It's also available in Amazon's Kindle store. Go to amazon.co.uk and search for my name again. Or just tell them to get on with it and become a member of Genius Material. Then they get all the other additional support as well. But listen, you don't want that book I just mentioned. You've already got the same information in your ebook and much more besides. This would be a step back for you, but it might be just what somebody else needs to convince them that there is another way of doing things, and there's more to revising than just slogging away with no reward. So it might be just the start that they need. Oh, and let me let you in on a little secret. The Genius Material resources that you know about, including those books and videos and whatnot, it's not just for financial services exams. Some of the people using my system are pilots, police, computer programmers, and many other professionals, as well as GCSE and A-level students too. So if you know of anyone who could do with a little extra or a little of what you've learnt with us, then send them our way, because it seems daft for anyone to struggle with revision, all for the lack of a good revision strategy, which is so easy to learn. After all, I don't teach the content of your exams. I know nothing about insurance and mortgages. I teach the process, the structure of learning, so that anybody can retain the information they learn, whatever that information is. So, to conclude then, what do you do if what you're doing isn't working? Well, it's said to be a sure sign of madness to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So, if what you're doing isn't working, the first thing to do is stop. Of course. And the next thing to do then, because it's no good just stopping, the next thing to do is to look at what you've done in your revision notes, where you have remembered the information easily when you test yourself later. And look at the notes you've made when there's revision that's been more difficult to recall later on, where it hasn't worked so well. And analyse, compare what you did in the one and what you did in the other. See what you did that made the difference, so that informs what you choose to do next time you make notes. So you're getting feedback, you're giving yourself feedback, and you're paying attention to that feedback, so that all the while you're honing your skills. It's a learning process. And the more attention you pay to what you did that worked, the quicker you'll develop a system that does work just for you. And just like the hokey cokey, that's what it's all about. So, have a productive week. That's it for now. See you next time. Bye-bye.